Welcome to Important Shift Podcast with Sarah
and Taryn, where we cover social issues, politics, popular culture, spirituality,
and basically anything and everything in between.
So let's get to it.
Let's get to it. Woo!
We are on our third episode, and we wanted to talk today about empaths and boundaries.
Empaths and boundaries. It's being in a threesome relationship, I think has really kind of helped, me personally. I think Taryn as well. Rage seemed to not really have issues with boundaries, but there's all different kinds of boundaries when you go into interpersonal and emotional levels. Like that that you didn't even know may have existed. Karen's just getting some socks.
It's a little breezy out here.
Yeah, it's crazy. The winter out there is insane on the East Coast right now, and it's
I think there's a huge snowstorm.
It's 73 degrees here in the South Bay, probably 80, I think, in Los Angeles.
Not to brag, but
So yeah, I think we could just kind of dissect what exactly an empath is and why is that important and how that relates to setting boundaries and figuring out if I believe to a degree it's like there is a spectrum of if you are an empath or not. I think all of us are obviously empathic. So what makes somebody an empath, and to what degree are you an empath, and to what degree do you need to work on your boundaries?
So we're going to read the definition, the psychology definition of, this is empathy.
Okay.
So I'll read the definition of empathy first, and then we'll talk about empaths. So, and this is from our Brave search engine, and it is an AI amalgamation of information on this search engine. Just
Brave?
for references, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we use Brave rather than some of the other search engines.
Like Safari or...
Yeah.
I mean, DuckDuckGo is good, though.
Or those not to be named that sound like Oogle. Okay, so in psychology, an empath is a person who has a heightened ability to absorb and experience the emotions of others. Empaths are characterized by their exceptional capacity to understand and connect with the feelings of others, often to the point of taking on those emotions as their own. Key traits. Emotional resonance. Empaths have a strong emotional response to others' feelings, mirroring their emotions as if they were their own. Deep emotional understanding. They have a profound ability to comprehend the emotional experiences of others, often without being explicitly told. Intuitive connection. Empaths may sense others' emotions and thoughts without verbal cues, relying on their intuition and emotional intelligence. High emotional intelligence. They tend to possess excellent social, communication, and leadership skills, which facilitate their empathetic abilities. Types of empathy. Emotional empathy. Empaths experience emotions similar to those of others, often accompanied by a strong desire to help or comfort. And cognitive empathy. They intellectually understand others' emotions, but may not necessarily feel them themselves. And then some characteristics of empaths.
It's like telepathy, like emotional telepathy.
Yeah.
And then especially with the cognitive one. Yeah, it's interesting.
Excellent listeners. Empaths are often skilled listeners, able to absorb and process others' emotions and concerns. Big-hearted and generous. They tend to be compassionate and willing to help others, often at their own expense. That's an interesting part of this conversation we're going to have.
Often at their own expense.
Yep. Highly intuitive. Empaths may possess a strong connection to their own emotions and those of others, allowing them to sense subtle changes in emotional states. and boundary challenges. This is the topic of today. Empaths may struggle to set healthy boundaries as they can become overwhelmed by the emotions of others. And then we'll just read in conclusion. In psychology, an empath is a person with a unique capacity for emotional resonance and understanding, characterized by their ability to absorb and experience the emotions of others. While being an empath can be a valuable asset in relationships and personal growth, it also requires self-awareness, emotional regulation, and boundary-setting skills to maintain emotional well-being. Thank you, Brave AI.
Thank you, Brave. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think, and interestingly enough, when I first met, when Taryn, Brage, and I were first together, Taryn had said that she was an empath, I think, and then I think at that point I hadn't quite processed a lot of my trauma. So I still, and your brain doesn't fully develop, I think, until you're 27. So I feel like, for a lot of people, at least, like maybe, I feel like there's other levels to it, but it's like, to really understand who you are and become the person that you're becoming. And then, you're always expanding. But, at this point, Taryn, recognized that she was an empath. And, my journey had led me to realize I was an empath. And I think mine was way more of the cognitive type of thing, because people who have traumatic experiences, they often try to overanalyze and overthink everything. So you try to play out each and every scenario that could possibly happen and then choose quickly. So you are always trying to tap into other people's thoughts, but from a fear-based intention. So it was, and with that, it becomes a really dangerous, when your intention is from a low vibration, it can tap into very dangerous areas, because you end up being clouded by this fear, this lower emotion, and then you're really not feeling into your intuition. You're really not feeling into your guidance, your gut, and through the heart space, and you're thinking about it, and then you start to twist things, and then maybe start to see things that aren't actually reality. So
another aspect of that is you may be sensing something that is real in that other person. Let's just say, from the perspective of this example that we're talking about, where Sarah had some trauma as a young person, the person standing in front of her may have some aspect in their personality similar to what her abusers had. But they're not necessarily doing that thing to Sarah in that moment. But your response to that person, because you have this very keen awareness of the depths of someone from your own trauma, you can see,
they could potentially do this.
Right. They could be a predator.
So they are doing it right now. Yeah.
Right. So you might respond to that person like they are an abuser, even though they're not currently doing that, because you sense that they have that capability or that potential.
Right. And which, we did brush up on it, I think, a little bit in the last episode, there was a guy, early on in our relationship. Just by the way, if we talk about the timeline, just so you guys know, we all met, the three of us met in 2008. And we were first dating, but, basically it was the start of a relationship. It was dating, and then, but we moved in together pretty much right away, maybe a month after we started dating. So we consider ourselves have been, together since 2008. So anyway, early on in our relationship, it was a guy, and he was like a younger guy, or maybe a guy, he was around my age at the time, like in my early 20s or early to mid 20s. And he just, I think he was just checking Taryn and I out, like how guys do. And that, it used to be a very common thing. I don't know if we have any younger listeners out there, But, guys used to whistle at girls, especially like workers, or guys driving in cars would beep at girls and honk their horns. They'd be like, woo, woo. And I can't whistle. Taryn, can you whistle? Yeah, that whistle. Like, woo-hoo.
Sarah can sing, and she can tone, and she can do light language, but she can't whistle.
I think because I don't like whistling, probably. Because I was like, I don't like whistling. So, yeah, I was like, but anyway, yeah, it's that kind of whistle. Woo, woo, yeah. And, thank
But
you.
yeah, it didn't used to be, while it wasn't like you got excited as a woman when someone whistled at you, it didn't used to be considered maybe as offensive as it is now.
And degrading.
Yeah, women didn't respond like, you fucking asshole, I can't believe you're putting me down by whistling at me. It used to be, at best an annoyance, or at worst an annoyance, at best maybe a compliment. Like,
maybe,
I look good today.
And maybe every once in a while the guy was hoping that the girl would stop and be like, oh, hey, who are you? What's your name?
Which
hey,
I don't think that really happens.
But it definitely didn't stop working, I think, probably by the early 2000s. And, it was like, but I remember when I was a teenager, though, if you walked down the street and you didn't get any whistles, you did feel like, oh, do I not look good today? Like, I remember that. That was a thing.
Like, if you walk by a construction site and there's a bunch of guys and no one paid attention to you, you're like, I look like crap today.
Right, and that's funny. And now that it's common, I think some people did make videos about that, and it's like, yeah, it's not. But anyway, it's very vulgar, and I used to hate it, like, really, and. That's what eventually, it's a love-hate relationship. You're like, if you get it, you like, okay, you're confirming that I look hot today. Great. But if you but you don't, but anyway, at a certain point, I started getting very angry at it because I felt like I wasn't in control. And it felt like the guys were, what's the word? Like impeding on my,
like infringing on your boundaries.
Yeah, infringing
right?
on my boundaries. I'm like, I did not ask for this. You're not allowed to look at me like that. And you're also telling the whole world that you think that that we are sexy. And we're not looking to be sexy right now. So put your stuff back in your pants and go, So anyway, eventually I told this one guy off. And I think he just looked at us. I don't even think he didn't whistle or anything. But I think he just checked us out. And I was like, you gross guy, just stay away from us. We don't want any of that. And he looked at me like I was a wacko, and Taryn looked at me like, Sarah, what are you doing? Like, that is inappropriate. You just attacked this guy, and he might have just been looking at, I don't know, our pants and be like, oh, those are cool pants. Like, probably not, but,
Well, and that's an example of utilizing this empathic ability that you have. And, we're assuming that maybe that's what he was doing. But then again, this might have just been an instance of, assuming somebody was doing something, even if you don't know for sure. Mm-hmm. But empaths, because they have these boundary issues that we'll get into, they oftentimes are responding to things that aren't happening in the moment. So they might be responding to subtext or to some feeling that they get.
Although sometimes they are right, and I think that's the thing that's
this
tricky.
Is the confusing part.
Especially when you have issues or trauma in this certain area. Usually, like, if we walked into a bar or any place, I could spot a creeper as soon as we walked in. And it was the same as, like, with rage. He could spot, because he was a security guard, and he was a fighter, and he lived in New York and all that kind of stuff. So he could spot someone who's dangerous or a possible threat, and was almost always right, So it was like, okay, we got to get out of here, But yeah, it was something that you can feel that this person, they are a creeper, and you're tapping into their energetic field, you're using telepathy, you're using your empathic abilities. And, interestingly enough, I think for me, I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but please, let us know in the comments below. Or you can always DM us or message us or email us, if you want to talk about certain things that we talk about. But yeah, I had facial recognition issues. And I realized it was because, I have such an open and awakened third eye. So I'm constantly like seeing orbs and seeing shapes. And, I feel like if I turn it up enough, I could definitely see, ghosts and beings. But sometimes I dim it down a little bit. But yeah,
But you can see the aura of somebody. Like she can see if someone is carrying a dark energy. Oh, there's our dolphins out there again.
Oh.
Every single time. That's so funny.
The dolphins are saying hello.
Yeah, they're playing right by the water here, by the edge.
We see Taryn is always first to see dolphins, and then we also have sea lions that we saw at the Redondo Pier that were really cute. They hang out.
They're sitting over on the dock over there.
It's so wonderful.
But oh man, I lost my train of thought.
Facial recognition.
Oh yeah, so she can see like these people that were walking on the beach last time we were here. They were just walking out to see the sunset, and they didn't look that different from everyone else. They were wearing a little bit darker colors and sunglasses and stuff, but she was like, did you see their energy? It was super dark, right? And when I thought about it, yeah, I did notice it. I was like, yeah, they look like they're either, drinking or maybe on some drugs or something, but you can start to really feel into the energy of people and go, oh, they don't want to be seen. They're kind of cloaking and clouding their...
But yeah, it's not like, it's not that they were drinking or on drugs. Like I've seen other people, they chill out here and they're partying and... Right. We've had our partying days, but it was something
just
of what they're carrying. So,
energy or attachments or...
And when you do get, like, it's one thing to party, every once in a while, but it's another thing when you are deep into your addiction and it's controlling you, and there are entities out there that definitely attach on to that because it's I hate to say it, but it's a weakness,
Well, and as we start to do more...
I shouldn't say I hate to say it. I'm pointing out to say it, and I know that if there are people out there that are in the middle of their addiction, it sucks to hear it because you want to feel like, righteous.
We've been there.
Yeah, it's like we've been in the midst of our addiction, and you feel righteous in it because, I grew up and I was given medicines when I was a baby and a kid, and then, was taking...
well, that's another podcast.
Drugging and medications, as a teenager.
You can do an addiction podcast.
You're like, right. So it's like and then when you take it away, I was so anxious. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk to people. I couldn't look at people, and people's faces were actually morphing, which I thought maybe that is related to the facial recognition. But anyway,
right.
With the facial recognition, I can't always recognize people's faces. And I think it's because I see their energy, and if their energy is off, or if their energy, like let's say the first time I meet a person and they are aligned and they are connected and they are feeling a certain way, and then I see them again and their energy's different, or maybe they're in a different consciousness stream or a different headspace, and feeling and not to say it's bad, we all get off, our energy gets off. We try to stay as aligned as possible, but anyway, it's interesting. Like I'll see them another time, and I literally can't recognize their face. So yeah,
so you might actually be seeing more into the spiritual and emotional signature of that person rather than the physical attributes of that person. So a lot of people, when they meet someone or they are first engaging with someone, they look at these very surface things in order to...
Facial features.
Yeah, features, or how tall someone is, or, what clothes they're wearing, things like that. Well, oftentimes empaths, they don't even necessarily notice any of that stuff because they're busy looking at the energy of that person or feeling the...
And the soul connection, like what their source of their being, of what they're... Wow, there's 3 dolphins out here.
There's
4.
like 5, I think. Yeah.
That's a party of dolphins.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're channeling, so basically we're walking, talking human avatar beings that are pulling in our consciousness from our source, from all of that we are, and we're each individually extensions of the source energy. And I feel like sometimes we might be, I did have multiple personality or DID at a certain point, so I'd pull in different streams of consciousnesses. So, it could have been, people that pull in different streams of consciousness, or, if you're channeling maybe your starseed consciousness at a certain time. And, so anyway, I think that was interesting. So if anyone experiences facial recognition, it would be cool to hear that. And I think that's a good way of it's a good thing to pay attention to. And I think a lot of people, you see some kind of defect in your, what quote unquote is the norm of human behaviors and normal human abilities. And it's like, maybe that's when you have a quote unquote defect, maybe it's actually an ability that you're just kind of scratching the surface of, and that once you just dissect it, it becomes, and empaths, first of all, like telepathy, that's a superpower. It's like,
well, we really think that the more clearing work that people do, the more we balance our systems, our energy flow, the more we understand our traumas, the more we do our own, psychological work on ourselves and get to know ourselves, our brain, our issues and all of that, the more you unlock whatever gifts that you've been given or that you've honed based on those things. So oftentimes people that have trauma end up utilizing that trauma in a positive way if they can get to the other side of the trauma. So once you've healed the initial thing that made you extra sensitive or made you an empath, then you can use your empathic abilities to really, help other people and to really recognize where someone else is at in a deeper way than anyone else in their life can do.
And it's very important, although, to make sure when you are helping people, that you are through the other side. Not to say you can't help people while you're processing trauma, but sorry, you can go ahead.
Yeah, but one of the things that we wanted to talk about was boundaries. So empaths often, because they very often have come from traumatic situations, or they're just, for whatever reason, extra, sensitive in their soul, they have
just unicorns,
right?
magically.
We're magical unicorns. We have a sense of the world that is very different from a lot of other people who are more, individualized. So if Sarah is upset, and I'm an empath, and I live with Sarah, and Sarah's not recognizing that she's upset or recognizing why she's upset, but I sense it, then I can either make her confront it by saying, what's wrong? Where people that are in relationships know this. Like if you're like, your wife is storming around the house or your husband's storming around the house and you're like, what is wrong with you? And they're like, nothing. What are you talking about? Nothing's wrong with me. I'm just doing the dishes. And you're like, well, but you're slamming the dishes. Like, why are you stomping around? When they haven't decided to deal with their own stuff yet, you are sort of holding a mirror up to them and forcing them to see that they're in a particular state. But people that aren't really empathic, they might not even pay attention to that. They might just be like, watching TV and not caring what the other person is doing. So we get affected by other people's emotions and behaviors much more because it's so much louder to us. So you can handle that in so many different ways, but making somebody confront their issues before they're ready can end up being a big strain on a relationship. If that person doesn't want to deal with their shit and you're forcing them to do it because you can't let it go, then that can also be an issue. So it's interesting with the three of us, we've had to really navigate this because we are all empaths. And so we're all like super sensitive to something, like the slightest thing that the other person is feeling. We're like, what's wrong with you? Why
So
are
it's good to be patient and just appreciate where somebody is in their current state, and and that's a good point. When you get more advanced in this practice, then you can realize, okay, my partner or this person, they're not ready to confront this, so I'll just hold space for them, and when they're ready, I'll be here when they're ready. And that's where the working through the heart space and the love comes in. It's not always easy.
Right.
And it's but it's a beautiful thing when you get to that, especially in relationships. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and one of the things that is related to that particular situation is when the empath feels, when they are so affected by someone else's behavior that they then take it on themselves, they can then feel a victimization. So, for instance, Rage and I have always had this where if he gets like sad or kind of low energy or depressed about something, I feel the need, and this is from my childhood trauma, I feel the need to make him happier or to change the situation. If he doesn't change his emotionality quick enough for me, I feel myself sliding into the same state that he's in. So let's say he's a little bit depressed. Well, then if I can't get him undepressed, then suddenly I feel depressed, and sometimes I then feel more depressed than he did initially.
well, yeah, I think at first it would go into anger, and anger is sometimes it could be a protector. In this case, it's a protector for you to not slide into depression. So it's it's above depression, so it's a higher vibration than depression, but it's like your little protector being like, no, we're not going to do this.
Right.
But I think you also feel it taps into your, not feeling like you couldn't fix them, like you wanted to fix them and you couldn't.
Right.
So,
Or I'm trying to fix you and you're not accepting my help. And then I end up turning it around. This was really in the beginning of our relationship, this would happen a lot, where I ended up feeling victimized by him. And he's like, I was depressed. I'm just in a low energy state. I'm depressed. And now suddenly you're mad at me for being depressed. And then you're mad at me for making you depressed. Well, all of that stuff ultimately was my choice to go into it, right? It was a sort of unconscious choice.
Subtlety.
But because I allowed that, his state to affect my state, now I'm feeling bad, and now I'm blaming him in my head for making me feel bad. So instead of helping him out of his state or just allowing him to be in his state until he gets through it, which for him is usually quite fast, if now I realize if I just kind of let him be, then he gets himself out of, that very quickly.
And also sometimes with some people, pressing people puts more pressure on it and can make them even more depressed or make them stay in that lower state longer, because then they feel bad for pulling you down. So yeah, it's a very great lesson to learn. And I think especially for people in relationships, if you notice that you're doing this, it's very tricky. And once you're able to you don't need to master it, but even just starting to work on something, and that's the great thing with triggers. Once you start to dissect your triggers, you find a place where you can slow down time and then realize, feel into your thoughts and emotions and feel into the order by which they're happening. And that's kind of what Taryn did here in saying, rage, the step 1, rage is depressed. Step 2, she would try to fix him. Step 3, she would get angry that she couldn't fix him. Step 4, then Taryn would get depressed and then blame rage. And then, so each one of those, it was in that order. There's obviously a lot of other steps. Like once you stretch in between the 1 and the 2 and the 2 and 3, then you can find there's other behaviors and thoughts that I'm thinking. And, I think however you works for, however and whatever works for you. Like Taryn doesn't need to write those down. For me, sometimes I would write them down or explore it and stretch it out and write it into like a song or a poem, or even just recognizing it. And then you could be like, and then what's brilliant about when you realize that you're the one doing something, then you can feel safe in it because you're the one in control. So you're the one who can fix it. So, that's what's kind of freeing with a lot of these triggers and with relationships. It's like your partner can do what they can do. And you can ask them, hey, this is really important to me. Can you work on this for me? Like let's say, for example, if Taryn said, okay, if while you're depressed, I'm going to go out and take a drive and go sit at the beach. Is that okay with you? And then, Rachel will be like, yes, that's okay. And then she'll come back.
That's better than you sitting on the, sitting next to me and staring at me while I'm depressed. Yeah.
So yeah, I think, it's really awesome when you kind of, step into this kind of work with your thoughts and emotions. It happens so quickly with us humans, especially when you're in a triggered state, and it's challenging to figure out the order by which things are happening, and then you play the blame game. Well, you did this, well, you did that, and it's like, just take over and take responsibility for what your part in it is, and be honest with yourself, because that's ultimately going to help you, and it's ultimately going to help your relationship. And I think that's, yeah, it's not
generally
fun,
from a spiritual perspective. This is kind of a good way to start. If you are feeling victimized, if you're feeling like a victim in any situation, that is a moment to stop and say, why am I allowing myself to feel like a victim? And just that is taking responsibility for the fact that you are in a place that you are allowing yourself to be in. Mm-hmm. And that's a very hard lesson to learn in spirituality, in life, and this is one of the things that they talk about in the law of attraction, is that if you're in a bad place in your life, in your emotions, whatever, you have to recognize that you have a part in that. Now, there are some exceptions. Obviously, like, very small children don't often have a choice in the state of their life. And so that's why we protect children, because children can be legitimate victims. There's other, circumstances in which people are just happen to be a victim of some random thing. But in general, if you're feeling victimized in your relationships or, at work or something like this, there is an aspect to that experience that you are contributing to yourself. And to take responsibility for your part in it, at first it feels like unfair, mm-hmm. Because you're like, but I'm the victim and this isn't my fault. Well, that's still victim energy. But when you do what Sarah was just saying, when you take responsibility for that place, now you have some level of control over it. You can say, I'm in an abusive relationship. I have two choices. I am staying in this relationship, therefore it is my choice to stay in it. Therefore, I can't solely blame the other person because I'm still in this relationship and I'm choosing to be here. Mm-hmm. Or, so you can leave the relationship, or you can say to the person, look, this has got to change. We are both contributing to an unhealthy environment, and we both have to do work here to figure out how to change this into a more healthy environment. But when you take responsibility, you also allow yourself to get more control over that situation.
I think the term like abusive relationship has been tainted, and there's been a lot of programming and brainwashing about it, to where, especially for women, to think that the man is abusing the woman, or also, I guess, lesbian relationships too. That I think we looked that up. There was the highest rate of divorces in lesbian relationships. I think it was something crazy. I can't remember. But yeah, but anyway.
Or there's plenty of female to male abuse as well. You know, there's, and
I
actually
mean, I think
that's something that's on the rise now when you give women the, you
this
know,
feminist power kind of thing, and it's like, you know,
women start
and
like
women
feeling like they can be abusive to men because of this
and men
victim
just have
energy.
to take it, and it's not fair. And even with social, but anyway, yeah, with emotional, to be in an emotionally abusive relationship, the thing is, the world is fucked up as hell. Like, the world is a mess, and what I've had to go through, what each Taryn has to go through currently, what Rage has been through, we've been through hell. And I'm sure every person on this planet has had some kind of emotional torture. I'm going to use the word torture as a child growing up, or mental torture. There's been emotionally abuse, even from your parents. Even if you had good parents that were trying to do their best, it's in this world, it's almost impossible to not have some kind of abuse going on because of how it's constructed. And if you don't believe that, then you are in some sort of denial of the state of the planet. We are in a slave matrix programming still. We're getting out of it, and that's, you know, what we're trying to do with you know, in this ascension. And we do believe we are star being consciousnesses here to elevate and to raise the vibration of the planet. But anyway, I mean, the thing is to catch those and not be so like heartbroken and be like, oh, my partner's abusing me. It's like, and you're abusing them. But find those things and then change them, and then you're no longer abusing each other. And how beautiful is that you can change your behavior and it can help them. And now let's say if you do change your behavior, and let's say you are in a relationship where your partner isn't changing with you, then you might get to a point where it might be time to sway paths. But I feel like we shouldn't divorce so quickly, and I feel like this planet has it's like putting a Band-Aid over a lot of things to be like, well, that was broken, yep, can't fix it. It's like, I feel like a lot of I was going to say couples. A lot of couples or relationship partners or whatever, I feel like you can probably almost fix anything as long as both people or all three people or if it's a family, if all family members are trying. And if somebody doesn't want to try, you can hold space for them until they're ready. And if it becomes to the point where they really can't, like if they are, a narcissist in some case, and, we're kind of going to go into...
so this is where the boundaries, this is where the boundaries come in, is
and there are, I guess we'll just knock there's your acquaintances. We've all had, friends along the way, or there's like neighbors that you see, or people that you see in the supermarket that are, your neighbor, and you're like, you have this feeling where you want to hide, like you don't want to see them, and then you feel bad about it. You're like, oh, I feel like I ignored them, but I know if I talk to them, they're not going to let me go, and I'm in a rush. I got to go to work, and I got to, it's in this fast-paced world that we live in. It's
so this is
struggling times.
This is where boundaries, have to be clearly defined. And if you haven't defined a boundary, because let's say it is your neighbor and you don't know them very well, and they just happen to be a very chatty kind of person, and you're you don't want to stop and talk to them, but you know that if you say hi, they're just gonna talk to you and overwhelm you. Mm-hmm. Then one of the things we've noticed is that if you clearly are very strong with them, let's say, like, okay, I gotta go, I'm late for work, I gotta go, and you just get in the car and leave while they're still talking, then society has kind of put it back on you as you're the rude person, right? You're the one that's cutting them off and not being polite, and so we take that on in ourselves, and then we feel like, oh, I have this obligation, I have to talk to this person to be nice, or else they won't like me, or they'll think I'm being rude. So we compromise our own boundaries in order to not hurt their feelings, or to just not have a confrontation. And a lot of this stuff comes from our unresolved issues with people in our family that were like that, or in our early lives that were like that. So to be able to set boundaries, you do have to have a certain sense of not taking any bullshit and not falling into guilt or
Well, and be honest with yourself and don't be angry. And I think that for me, that's what I usually feel. I get angry when I see this person, and then I'm like, I'm angry that I have to talk to them, and then I'm angry that I don't want to, and then I'm angry for feeling this level of kind of hate for this person right now. And I'm like, they're not really doing anything. And then so you're kind of being like a politeness, and then you have to cut it off, be like, okay, thanks, gotta go. But anyway, the thing what I figured out why I'm angry is because this person is being rude, and it's a selfishness, but they're not aware, and I don't think it's purposeful, but it's a part of it's a narcissistic tendency where they want to talk, so they're pushing themselves on it, and they think that they're being friendly, and they think that they're being a nice neighbor, and it's like when you, and everybody feels this, when you interact with somebody or you run into someone at the grocery store and you can tell they don't really want to talk, you would let them go.
Right.
You know?
So normal people would sense like, oh
yeah, we don't want
this
to keep
person
you.
seems like they're, busy.
Or
I
they're
don't want to,
tired, or
like,
they don't wanna
okay, maybe we'll talk next time. So that's a normal response. And then an empath will see that even more, and they'll be even more sensitive to it. And a narcissist and an empath are on opposite ends of the spectrum. The narcissist recognizes nothing about the other person because they are so consumed in their own self and their own self-interest.
How they look and what they're saying is so interesting.
Yeah, even if it's not conscious, they they just don't know how to get out of their own head and recognize someone else's state. So it's very interesting that empaths often have very intense abusive relationships with narcissists. And usually this comes from a relationship early on where an empath had to deal with a narcissist, and the narcissist loves the empath because the empath gives the narcissist energy that the narcissist needs to feed on, because the narcissist doesn't have their own energy balanced in their body, and they're like a black hole that's sucking all the energy from people around them.
And the empath wants
and
to
the
please
empath
them
just keeps giving and giving and giving because they don't have proper boundaries. So this is where, as the empath begins to understand themselves and start to set boundaries, oftentimes they have to first look at the relationships around them that are the most narcissistic people and begin to really say, can I still be friends with this person or in a relationship with this person if they are basically purely narcissistic? And like, I had to cut a friend off because I stopped, and Rage is very good with this, and he sat with me and talked with me, and he was like, that person is not, he held up the mirror to our friendship, and he's like, that person hasn't given back to you anything, and you just keep giving and giving to her. And what are you getting out of this relationship?
Yeah, it's like being an empath, and it's like you have this service to others energy, which is beautiful, and you could give infinitely to a degree. And then I feel like that's when some empaths get to a point where they get their breaking point, and they either like are emotionally exhausted or at the point where they're angry and like start being not understanding why. But anyway, this service to others energy, and it's a service energy, which is beautiful energy, but then it becomes like people pleasing. So, and even with your friends, like, if it's a close friend or, a coworker, you want them to feel good, because if they feel good and then you could see you help them feel good, then you feel good,
But then when you stop and recognize some of the people in your life might be people that you're always trying to make them feel good. And if you really go back and look at it, they're not really trying to make you feel good. The whole relationship might be about you, complimenting them and making them telling them how great they are doing at work or whatever. And these little moments where you realize, like, oh, I am literally the one giving all of the energy to this. And
Or even you come over, if you do, you give them, some kind of hula hoop lesson or some kind of, I think with some friends, like giving them some kind of Reiki energy, and I mean, I guess we do give people Reiki energy, even if we aren't trying to, and that's
right. But when people, the other aspect of this kind of a relationship is when the narcissist begins to expect stuff from you that should not be expected. It's a gift I'm giving you, but I've given it to you so freely and so consistently that now you expect it of me without giving anything in return. So this particular relationship, I had to look and say, oh, I am now feeling like I'm expected to give this person stuff and I'm not receiving anything in return, even to the point where I would go over to this person's house and spend the entire day with this person talking all day with
therapy.
her.
Yeah, like
doing therapy.
A person for someone to vent on you. And it's like, I'm not here for you to vent on. And then if I'm talking with you to try to help you work through a problem, as long as you're doing the work, it's beneficial.
And she didn't even offer me a glass of water or lunch. And I was there all day from morning until night. And at a certain point, I got home and I was like, it's freaking 8 o'clock in the evening
starving.
and I haven't eaten anything because I've just been sitting there talking to her all day long. I'm at her house and she didn't even offer me a fucking glass of water. So that kind of a person, you kind of go, oh, wait a second, something is wrong here. And taking responsibility for my part in that and saying, I have allowed this situation to go on.
And it's not about, you could have asked for a glass of water, and it's like, okay, paying attention to your energy or being like, oh, aren't you hungry? Maybe we should get some food. It's not about that. It's more of an energy to where...
Well, it's a metaphor of the fact that she's not thinking about me.
Right. It's like that, and that's what I wanted to clarify. It's like, and it would be the thing is with relationships like this, if it's one time, it may happen. Like, let's say you're going through a traumatic event and your friend comes over and you're just so distraught that you forgot to offer them water. Whatever. But this is more of like every single time. And it's more of a, for people who are very sensitive to energies, you can feel into it. It's not about the freaking glass of water or the lunch. Obviously. It's about the fact that somebody's a vampire sycophant, like an energy sucker, and then you're not even getting back anything. You're not like saying, oh, how are you? How is your relationship going? Or you seem to be doing well. Are you still doing, the showers? Or, Taryn is just coming out of this really traumatic health thing. Like, check in with her, nothing. Yeah. Like, no kind of check in with how the other person's doing. And, your friends are there, they can be helpers for therapy and for talks, and especially if you're going through something hard. But if it's always surrounding you and your concerns and never about the other person, that's when it's really lopsided. And that's the point where it's like, okay, when do you cut it off? We had another friend who was in our friend circle, and it got so toxic that we had to cut off this friend. They very inappropriately hit on us, like just really
randomly,
weirdly and oddly, but like kind of aggressively a little bit, forcefully, like after we were obviously like no, and then it kind of got creepy, and then we're like, okay. But it was like, it wasn't just that. And it's like, it's when you express a situation and be like, of course that might happen, especially for kids in college. If you're a friend and you're out and you're partying and like you accidentally hit on them when you're messed
if it's
up,
a one-time thing,
like whatever.
If somebody transgresses a boundary one time and you say, oh, that was weird and inappropriate, I don't like that, and they say, oh, okay, I'm sorry, that's not a big deal.
And they're over
that
it.
happens. Yeah. That's not what we're talking about. But when somebody doesn't respect your answer and feels as though when you're trying to set a boundary, that's crazy or that you're being weird, then that's when you have to say, okay, this person does not respect
my boundaries. And like we were saying, no, and it was just kind of like, yeah, they didn't want to
and
hear
with
it.
somebody who doesn't respect boundaries, oftentimes, and this is what Sarah and I have learned very well from Rage, he's very good as the bouncer and the security guard. He's very good with identifying if somebody has a particular set of qualities,
personality
where they
trait.
will not change,
Yeah.
and they might soften it for a little bit to get back into your circle, but then they'll start doing it over again.
He can analyze the patterns of the personality traits and assess if they will not change or they have the capacity to change. And some people don't have the capacity to change.
And some people just don't want to. And in those cases, the tough thing, very difficult for empaths to do, is to stop interacting with that person. And if in the future things change and that person has an epiphany and is like, oh my gosh, I was being a narcissistic asshole.
That's what Taryn and I always say. We're like, well, maybe if they come back later and then they apologize.
Yeah,
and, you know,
maybe
sadly,
in the future
sadly, in
will.
most cases, they probably won't. But that's how we hope for.
That's how we make ourselves feel better about doing it. But when you're an empath, it is an extremely difficult skill, but a very vital one, to sometimes say to somebody, no, you may not participate in my life any longer. You will have to find somebody else to replace my energy in your life.
Energy from.
Right.
I will no longer give you energy.
I'm not going to be your victim anymore.
And it does suck because you don't really find out until after you feel like you've given your energy, because, you know, we do have hope for people that they maybe will change, or that you can bring the light out in somebody and they can expand and change, and some people just aren't capable of. So yeah, I think it's really important to know when to cut the cord with friends, acquaintances, and then even bigger for family, you know. And it's like,
family is an extremely difficult one, because there's so much programming in society that the family that you were given is the family you have for life, and no matter what they do, they're still your family. And as people that have done a lot of work in these arenas and in spirituality, we completely disagree with that. We think you have to earn anybody's friendship, relationship, including your own family members. And your family, you don't owe your family anything. That's not to say if it's a healthy relationship, fine. If they give to you and then you give to them, that's great. But what we're talking about is just because they are your family and you were born into this relationship does not mean that you have to stay in that if it is hurting you or if it is not serving.
And guilt, like, it's so crazy that, you know, religion uses guilt to keep people bound. You know, I grew up Baptist Christian, you know, went to Catholic school, so it was just surrounded in guilt. And, you know, other religions use guilt as well, maybe not even religions, but just your family in general use guilt if you don't, you know, call your mom every so often. And, you know, and I guess before we dive into family, I'll kind of go into it, but just to finish up with friends and acquaintances, I was going to also talk about how to cut the cord with your boss. And that one is a very tricky one to set a boundary. And, you know, there comes time to where, you know, when it's time to leave a job, and when you can repair it, and how to set boundaries with, like, with coworkers too. Like, I had coworkers that I had to say, do not call me on my days off. Do not. Like, unless it's some kind of, like, work emergency, or you're having you know, and you have to explain to them what an emergency is. Meaning, like, the building is on fire, someone
Cut their hand.
Cut their hand, and someone died, or something. Like, no, it's not an emergency for, you know, if some fire alarm went off, like, a couple stores down. No, that, you know, for a test and there's no fire. I don't need to know that. Or if two people had an argument, like, nope, that's not, So, but
and as a boss, where Sarah was in charge of a bunch of people, if you tolerate behavior of someone who is crossing your boundaries, then you begin to lose the ability to enforce those boundaries with other people as well. So how you behave with this one person who's a boundary crosser then starts to affect how the other people see you. And they think, oh, well, he's doing it, so I can do it too. So enforcing boundaries is important not only for that person, but also for setting a tone as to how you're going to deal with and be dealt with by all of the other people.
Yeah, and I mean, it came from, I think I had it with the work I had before where my boss would call me on my days off or email me or text me and it made it seem like, and I said, like, I don't like to be bothered on my days off unless it's an emergency. And, I was still having some, insecurity, like I was still having this people pleasing. Like I wanted to show that I was the best and I was the good worker and I'm the good girl and I'm the, always on it. And I had to let that go. And it was like, this is not, of course I could be on it. I could work 70 hours a week. I could do it. I'm tough. I can handle anything. Kind of this fighting energy. And it's like, well, no, if you're sitting at home watching a show with your family or you guys are sitting out hanging out, you shouldn't have to stop to take a work call, especially if you said you didn't want to not bother me. And it was, whatever, even if it's a quick call, I'm still like, you can ask me tomorrow.
And this is interesting too, because this is an example of how your own issues can then turn around and be used against you, right? So if Sarah's having a self-worth issue where she feels like I have to prove that I'm the best worker because in my past I had to ask people for acceptance, I had to prove to my family that I was the best, or I had to be the good kid or whatever, and that's an unresolved issue that she had in her past. She's now doing that same thing with her boss and trying to overextend herself in order to prove that she's the best.
And people don't think that. It's not like when they call and they answer like, oh, Sarah's such a good worker. We love Sarah. I mean, they might be happy like that, and that's what I'm feeling. Like, I want them to be like, oh, thank God Sarah answered the phone. She's so good. And it's like,
right. So she's looking for approval for herself from these people, but what she's really looking for is approval from people that don't exist anymore.
And my boss isn't thinking that. I could not pick up the phone and then talk to them tomorrow and be like, yeah, I was in the middle of something. And it's,
but once you are that person who answers the phone all the time, this is where that narcissistic thing we were talking about comes in. Then they start to expect you to answer the phone all the time.
Take advantage.
So not only do they not congratulate you for being such a good worker and answering the phone all the time, they then expect it of you and take advantage of it, and then if you don't do it, then they think that you're being lazy.
Yeah.
So you're almost painting yourself into the opposite corner because you wanted to be the good one, and now you're expected to do even more than that, and they still don't think you're the best.
And they will never find full appreciation, and that's really. So yeah. Anyway, I think with stuff like that at work, just do your best to really be clear and assertive. And this is, thanks to Taryn and Rage, but, Rage really, there's a lot of things that instead of beating around the bush of what you want, just say flat out what you want, not in anger, not in, not in an angry tone. To be like, don't call me on my day off. Be like, I really need my days off to myself. It's very...
Or don't even explain it.
Yeah.
Just, I don't answer the phone on my day off.
Mm-hmm.
And then, once you've said it, don't answer the phone on your day off.
And don't do it. Yeah.
Because if you say, I don't do this, and then you do it, then you're the one that is confusing the issue and creating, you know what I'm saying? You're not following your own rules, and so you look like you don't really know what you're talking about. And then if they're your boss or someone that works for you, then they don't believe your boundaries. Yes. Yeah, they don't believe. It's like the parent who says no, and then the other parent says no, but they still give you the thing anyway. You always go to that one because you know that they don't really mean what they say.
Yeah.
And as a boss, that's a really not good quality, because if you don't mean what you say, then you can't enforce rules with people, and if that's your job, then you're not being a very good rule enforcer.
And really, and if you do, like, and I always got this fear, like, that I would get fired. It's like, if you do get fired for not
for respecting yourself,
then maybe you don't need to work there, and it's like, and eventually this kind of led me to leaving anyway. It was kind of these subtleties of, narcissistic behavior and not crossing boundaries. And it was just kind of like, you get to a point where you'll be like, if you try to set the boundaries and it's not working out, that you have to find a way to respect yourself and just know that, whatever you choose, it's going to be the best for you. It's ultimately your decision. So if you are able to find a way to, like with family, if you're able to find a way, like my mom was a narcissist.
Well, I just wanted to finish one thing about that. Then in the work environment, like she had someone that worked below her that was not respecting these boundaries, and she said it a number of times. You cannot call me on my day off. I'm in the middle, I'm about to go on to the stage and sing a song at a show, and you're calling me for something that makes no sense. Well, at some point, that person has crossed those boundaries enough, they must be fired. And as an empathic, sensitive person, as a boss, that's a hard thing to do, because you're thinking to yourself, well, they're not that bad of a person and they really didn't mean it, and you're giving them excuses. But if you keep giving them excuses for this behavior, then those boundaries mean nothing. So at a certain point... And you'll do it with
other people, like you were saying.
Right, and at a certain point you have to actually stand up and say, look, I told you, I gave you the opportunity to learn. You didn't, and so I have to say, I'm sorry, you can't work with me anymore. Like that's it. And then the same thing goes with the boss. Even if it's a horribly difficult situation, which it is when you're working for somebody and this is your livelihood, if they are abusing you and you're in a situation where you feel like your boss is an abusive boss,
or clients. Taryn's had clients that were abusive towards you.
Right. So even if it's a situation that's really going to affect your own life, like it's very difficult, you're going to have to find another job, and that's not an easy thing to do. You have to decide whether it is important enough to you to live by these principles of protecting your own energy
every time you go into work, which I would do, protecting energies every time I would walk in.
Right. And so in that case, it might actually, they're jumping now, the dolphins are jumping. It might actually be, more important for you to sit down, take time on a Saturday or Sunday when you're not working or whatever your hours are, and find yourself another job and go through that entire life change, because you are in an environment where you are being disrespected to the point where it's affecting your life. And one life change, that's a big deal, to work for a better boss who will respect you instead of slaving away and giving your energy away to someone who doesn't respect you. That is something that is a hard thing to do, but really worth it in the end.
And I think it was a process to where I'd sit down and I would weigh it out. You'd be like, okay, what's my limit of what I can take? And that's, what I mean with this world, that this world is legitimately fucked up, is that there are a lot of bosses, and I was kind of hopeless. I'm like, well, everybody's messed up. Everybody's going to be abusive. And then, what's your line for how much abuse you want to handle?
Well, and also once you truly come to the other side of the self-worth thing, and you say, it's not my job to make my boss think I'm the best worker in the whole world. That is not going to help me or fulfill my soul. It's more important for me to have time with my family and to be able to play with my cat. And if I'm giving up extra time after, over and above the 60 hours a week I already work, I'm giving up my personal time to fulfill this self-worth thing, hole in myself.
Then maybe
and it's
you gotta fix that
compromising
thing.
my family.
Yeah.
You have to fix that hole in yourself first, and then be able to say, look, my self-worth it has nothing to do with this job.
Then you'll always be running. And then you'll run from the next job, and then, by law of attraction, you'll find a similar boss, and maybe they're a little bit better, but,
Right.
And so really doing the work on yourself, doing the clearing, the energetic clearing in your energy field and in your energy bodies, and really letting go of that people pleasing, that giving yourself. It's kind of like a self-destruction demon. Like, really, you give more of yourself to where it negatively impacts your personal health, and then your family and your livelihood. And it's like family and health should come first.
Yeah, like if your family has complained, a number of times about how much time you spend at work and how you don't pay attention to them because you're too, focused and paying attention to pleasing your boss, you've got a problem. You have an addiction. It happens to be a work addiction, but you have something that is preventing you from enjoying the rest of your life and forcing you to give your energy away. So I think we've covered that.
We covered that. But I think, and moving into, what's the line to where it's when you can still positively live with your family members, or when you can keep that job when it's actually not so bad, and maybe you're stretching the truth of how bad it really is, being tapping into that kind of victim energy, and how, have you explored all the areas to where you can change the areas that you need to work on in yourself, and then communicate with your partner or your boss or your coworker, and then or your family member, and try to fix those. So, for example, there were people in my life I had to cut out completely because there was a boundary that was crossed that you should never cross, and they were not coming back from it. And, a client of Taryn's, she had an issue with her mother, and her mother was, a narcissist growing up and abused her in her childhood, and now, wanted to come back together, and, her mother had improved and did the work to rebuild the relationship, was trying, and then that's a really beautiful thing. I think, you always want to save the relationship, and I think that's my Archangel Uriel energy of the transmutation in, save and salvage what you can. And I feel like on this planet and humanity, why we're all still here, and, on other timelines, there was a nuclear explosion when Hillary Clinton was president, and the whole world exploded.
This is a possibility.
As a possible timeline, which maybe I'll make a note. We can talk about it in another podcast. But so anyway, there was some time travel happening, and where, they put Trump as president, and he helped save the planet. And it's like, so if humans gone so far, or are so far gone that they aren't savable, that they aren't salvageable, that humanity is too sick? And I believe that the answer is no, that we can change, and humans are here for a purpose, the human experiment. And, any light that you see in another person, you can see it and expand it. And that's the superpower of an empath. You can see the light in each other.
And the fine, line that we walk is trying to navigate between when something is salvageable and takes a lot of extra work, and when it isn't. And that is something that each person has to figure out on their own. And really, it's such a deep individual decision about whether, you should, you can spend years working on a relationship and make that time that you spent working worth it if you can get to the other side and turn that relationship around into a positive thing. Any relationship, it can be worth 10 years of work, or it may not be worth that. And you may spend 10 years working on something and then realize that it's unsavable. But at some point, the decision to not save something is an option that most empaths do not believe. They don't believe that they have the option to stop giving their energy to something. They think they have to continue doing it oftentimes until they die. And so it's really important to have real deep reflective moments when you say, is this job, is this relationship, or is this family member worth all of the energy and time that it will take to make this into something positive? And the answer is only an individual answer, and each
and it could change.
Situation is different.
It could be no at some point, and then it could be yes at another point, or it could be yes at some point, and then it could be no. So yeah, paying attention to these subtleties, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think if you do feel that your empathic abilities are impacting your life in a positive way, or maybe in a way that doesn't feel positive right now, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help with any questions you might have.
But I think talking about the family aspect is important, because it has, with a situation like yours, it has repercussions out to not only the family, but then we can talk about to the people in that neighborhood, in that circle of people. So Sarah had to cut off her family because her family were the abusive people in her life, and that started when she was a baby, and it went all through her childhood. And so almost everyone in the immediate family was an abuser. But the thing is that's also difficult is those that weren't abusers directly, but were involved in the abuse. They were also in that cycle of sickness and gaslighted, and were gaslighting Sarah. So when Sarah spoke up for herself and said, I do not want to participate in this abusive cycle anymore, I need to get the hell away from these people. The people, first her abusers reached out and said, no, you're not allowed to leave, and you're just making things up or whatever. But then the extended people.
And then come home right now.
Right.
All these letters. But yeah, I think also, and then, my sister, I guess she talked to a psychic or something and said that it happened, the abuse happened on my timeline that I was on, but it didn't happen on their timeline. So, and I was like,
that's one way of utilizing the concept of timelines.
And she
not
really
take
believed
responsibility.
But then I was like, is she just saying this to trick me to go back into it? And so,
or she tricked herself with it. But that's the problem with gaslighting.
Yeah, you don't know if you're tricking yourself.
Yeah, you truly believe the gaslighted story. And the thing is, each person, once we realize that each person is responsible for their own life and has sovereignty over their own life, it is not her responsibility to tell you how to live your life. And even if she doesn't believe your story of how you experienced your life, it's still not her job to tell you how to live your life. And it's not your job to tell her how to live her life. If she wants to stay and live with her abusers, that's up to her. And you're not trying to convince her that she needs to leave. I gave my terms.
I will only talk to you if you,
respect
and admit that, this is a possibility. And if you don't want to come to
or at
the
least
truth of it,
respect that you believe it's a possibility, or that you believe it happened to you. She can say, I don't believe it happened to me, but maybe it happened to you. But
And then we
even
can-
that, it's a messy situation because she's still involved with her abusers and with your abusers. So if somebody in your life, like for instance with the boss, if someone's still working in that environment and they are still owing that boss their allegiance, it's very hard to be friends with them if you've gotten rid of that boss out of your life, because that person still has that person in their
still
life.
have those cords and connections and the gaslighting and the stories that they're telling themselves on how to how to deal with the abuser.
Right, and this extended even to people in Sarah's town. She had people in her town that were reaching out to her to try to get back in communication with her because her family told them to. Right? So it's like...
But I think what it did is, like, even if the people and they
were reaching out to me.
and they reached out to Taryn. Yeah, I mean, I think that they realized something. It brought light to the situation that don't know if I was the first person to bring light to. You know, I've heard of some estranged aunts that were off and, you know, that were alcoholics, I was told. But maybe they tried to speak out about it and were just kind of pushed aside. So, you know, it was extremely challenging, and there was so much gaslighting for me personally, and then fear of like what they would think of me, and then you just have to let go of all that, and like
And it
maybe
took you years, so
yeah,
to go through
it took over a decade, and you know, fear of them thinking that I'm the crazy aunt that's off in LA and I lost my mind and I'm out with a
abandoned
threesome
the family
relationship, and yeah, I abandoned them, and I'm just selfish, and you know, am spreading lies, and you know,
You're
just
in a cult.
I'm in a cult with this threesome marriage, and you know, so it's like I had to let go of all of those things that, you know, what I thought that they were probably thinking, and if it's right or if it's not right, who the fuck, like, you know, but it's like...
And that's again where the self-worth comes in. If you stop caring what they're thinking about you because you have your own self-worth and you've found peace in your own self and your own life, then how they're perceiving you doesn't matter. It doesn't affect you. And I mean, it might affect you a little bit in the sense of like, oh, I'm sad that I don't have a family anymore, because you're a human being and that feels sad. But it doesn't affect you to the point where you feel like you have to now compromise your own self and sovereignty to go back to these people who were abusive to you, or who were friends with people who are abusive to you. And when you allow even that third party infringement on your boundaries, it starts messying up the clarity.
That's the danger with gaslighting. Like, there's families that we see do it, you know, and it's so dangerous because it's such a dangerous habit, because when you're telling stories and you retell these stories that are not true, it just, you're brainwashing yourself and your loved ones. And, you know, people that do this, I'm sure everyone has family members that do this, and you just deal with it. Just make sure that, you know, if you are in a situation with them, you set proper boundaries.
And you protect yourself.
And protect yourself.
Energetically.
You know, and, you know, maybe find a way to ask that person, hey, could you not tell that story again? It really bothers me.
Right. Or, you know, if you know that they're just going to tell that story, then you just kind of say, okay, if I hear that story, I'm just going to laugh. You know, I'm just going to let it roll off my back. This has happened to me, is I have somebody in my life who is a gaslighter, and they tell a particular story over and over again from their perspective and in a hurtful way towards me. And there's really nothing I can do, because this person is never going to stop telling this story the way that they want to tell it, and they think it's hilarious. And it's at the expense of my feelings.
But they're just unaware.
But they're narcissistic,
they're unaware
and they
that
don't...
It hurts you. And that's the thing with some narcissists, why it's also... Because they're not aware of how other people... They don't know that it hurts your feelings. So they think that it's just funny, and that they are the showman that gets to talk about the story. And
that's, that's maybe giving them a little extra credit. And I think in a way, if they stopped and thought about it, they would recognize like, oh, maybe that's embarrassing or something, but they don't really care. And then it also makes people listening to the story uncomfortable, because it's an uncomfortable, when you're making fun of somebody, it's like a bully. When a bully is bullying someone else, most people that aren't that bully feel bad for the one that's being bullied, even if they're afraid to say something. So all of the friends of the bully, they're only friends with that person because they're afraid of that person turning on them. So they would rather make fun of, this person be made fun of,
and
so
then
that they don't end up
like
the
it
one,
didn't happen.
Right, so that they don't end up the one who's, the attention is getting put on them. So standing up to bullies is a important thing, but also stop allowing those people to get the attention. And or if you can't stop that situation, try as best you can to take the emotion out of it and just say, wow, it's really sad that they feel like they have to tell this story about me because they don't have the self-worth to tell a nice story. So they have to tell a story making fun of somebody or putting somebody else down.
Or maybe the creativity to come up with a new story or make, But yeah,
right.
I mean, I think
they know it gets attention and that's what they want. So
it's patterns, though, with family patterns where they get together and they retell stories. And it's a weird behavior that we've all kind of gotten used to when you go and you sit at Thanksgiving dinner or like Christmas dinner or whatever, and everybody tells the same stories over and over again. And it's like it can be a positive, fun thing when you share moments like Taryn, Rage, and I will sit and we'll oh hi,
that's our
friends here.
Our friend Kathy's walking up to us.
But yeah, when you we'll sit and we'll reminisce and reshare moments about certain happenings that have happened that we remembered and were positive memories that we held, like maybe cute stories when we first got together. I can't think of one.
Yeah, but if you're saying it with the same words and the same thing, that's when you start to realize like it's a gaslighting story. If you're sharing a memory, that's different than telling a gaslighting story where it's the same, the same intention, the same words, the same exact, thing, story that you're retelling for, and it's almost like an addiction where you're trying to get a particular feeling by telling this again. It's like, the first time you smoked a cigarette and you felt like, woo, and your head got, woozy and it was fun. Well, now you're doing it to try to get that feeling again, but you recognize that it's not giving you the same thing back. That's a good way of recognizing, oh, this is a gaslighting story. This person is trying to get a feeling from it by just repeating the same behavior over and over again. And so if you have family members that do that kind of thing with you, for me, because I couldn't stop it and we're still in an environment where that's happening, I just have to separate my emotions from it and say, okay, this is kind of funny, or, whatever, just kind of tune it out until it's over and just take the emotion away from it.
And it's timing. There might be a time when it's appropriate to say to that person, that story, it does upset me. I know you think it's funny, but if you don't mind, could you just not tell that story anymore? I really, it does hurt my feelings a little bit. I know.
And if you have someone that's open enough and willing to look at their own behavior, that might be a really big turning point in that relationship. If they say, oh, gee, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was hurting your feelings. Maybe I'll stop telling that story. But, that's a big ask for people with narcissistic tendencies. And you either are going to have to accept that that's just who they are and this is a part of your relationship and you just remove your emotions from it, or if you can't accept it and you can't change it, that's the time in which you might have to say, okay, I'm not going to give my energy to this anymore. And that was a decision that I had to make with this person, and I had to say, my relationship with this person is important enough to me to work on the rest of it and save the relationship and just disengage from those moments when this discomfort is happening.
And just stay in touch with it. And Taryn does a lot of work in staying in alignment and attuned with her emotional state and her emotional strength, her emotional and mental strength. And when she does feel triggered, she does talk with Rage and I about it.
Which is also really important to have people to talk with you when you're in an unbalanced place.
And kind of bring you back and say, like, you're triggered. That isn't really what happened. Or say, you know what? Yeah, that did happen. You are right. She was out of line. Just take a breath. I'm so sorry for you're dealing with this. And then you work through each case. And then as long as you feel that the relationship is beneficial for you as well as for the other person, then that's when you have to assess if you want to keep the relationship. If it is beneficial and it feels fulfilling and it feels better to stay in the relationship than to leave it, then save what you can.
And if you don't have people in your life like we do to talk with, that's when it's good to find a friend that can talk to you about these kinds of things. Find a group, maybe a local group that you can gather with, or find a therapist. And we fully believe in, having somebody, whether it's a tarot reader or, someone, a personal trainer, or someone that will listen to you, whether it's a paid person who's paid to listen to you, or whether it's somebody who can just tolerate your crap enough to listen to you and tell you, like, okay, and someone who's honest, who's going to say, you know what, you're both responsible for this, or you're right, they're wrong, or you're wrong and they're right, and you're just triggered and you need to get over yourself.
So someone who knows you and can tell you the truth. But yeah, I think that was great. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I think Empaths and Boundaries is a wonderful thing. We were going to tap into, so we'll just send a teaser for the next one. But I think, what the new generation, speaking about people who cross over boundaries, how to maybe upgrade the consciousness into feeling this new behavior that humans seem to be doing, where they just emotionally vomit all over everyone and using online platforms just to vent their frustrations on in an unhealthy way, to where they feel righteous in their anger, but they're not really working through it.
And that's sitting in that victim energy. When you, again, that circles back to what we were talking about at the beginning. If you find yourself being a victim, being self-righteous about your victimhood, or going online and telling everyone what a victim you are, then the chances are you're the one who needs to stop and look at your own triggers and your own thought patterns and your own responsibility in this situation. And instead of barfing all over, other people or the internet about your victimhood, that's a good time to stop and say, maybe I should look at my own self, and maybe I should either take myself out of this situation.
If you're going to do something that it lowers the viewer's vibration or it lowers other people's vibration, maybe you shouldn't do that. If you're going to create a song or make a movie that, scares people or like lowers people's vibration, there are some things that, it could intrigue insight to past, like maybe war movies or something, but if you're going to have something that it truly lowers the person's vibration, I don't believe that it's bettering humanity.
Not helping you or helping them. So, we happen to be in a service to others kind of thing where we believe that, one of the things that we're put on this planet to do is to live a happy, healthy life and to help other people do the same. And, perhaps this is the two-world split that we might talk about in a future podcast, but where some people who want to live in a service to self energy will be on sort of one timeline, and those of us who want to be in service to others and help each other will be on our own timeline, hanging out together.
So we are going to split the timelines, I guess.
Yeah.
There's going to be different timelines.
Yeah, let's do it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Split.
All right. Well,
Okay.
bye for now, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for listening. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, dolphins, for coming out too. We'll
They've been
see you.
here the entire time, hanging out in front of us. They're jumping and playing. It's quite amazing. Maybe we'll post a picture or a little video of it later.
Sounds good. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.